Hello everyone at the 2019 Shelley Preparedness Fair. This is Andrew Skousen speaking to you from further south down in Utah. I apologize that my father, Joel Skousen, and I aren't there in person to be able to interact with you. We have enjoyed being at the Shelley Preparedness Fair. It's one of the few preparedness fairs that we still make time for. This year, due to a variety of weather problems, we were unable to attend. But fortunately, the Gilmores are on top of things technologically, so they were able to provide this other avenue for us to present our information to you from afar. We are grateful to David and Ben for all of their hard work on this and all of their staff. We have found them very helpful, and we refer to them often in our preparedness. This topic that I am presenting today is loosely titled Prep Tech. I am expecting that most of you will get a lot of information from my dad's speech that is coming right after this. This technology that I will be covering will actually be helpful for you after you get the bigger picture of what is coming down in the world. Obviously, here we are at a preparedness fair, and each of us comes here with a slightly different mentality about what you are preparing for. Many of you might be coming here because you are preparing for a massive earthquake. This is something that all of us should be prepared for. It's definitely in the cards. You might be here because you are expecting a form of economic collapse or some kind of social unrest. You might be here because you know about EMP strikes. Or you might be here for nuclear war, or all of the above. The point that we have found as we go about preparing is that the best preparations are useful not just now, but often now and later. And in other words, the best preparedness items are those that make you more self-sufficient, where you are able to provide for yourself in water, food, shelter, and all of the above. So just to give you a point about where we are coming from, this is our paradigm, and you will obviously be able to fill in a lot more of this when you see my dad's presentation. We expect that there will be a surprise start of World War III. We expect it to start from a nuclear strike from Russia and China. It will be preceded by an EMP, high altitude strike that will take down the public utility grid. At least for a time. We expect that they will work hard to get the infrastructure back up, but at this time they are woefully unprepared for this kind of event, and the few spare parts that they have will probably be used mostly for the critical cities. Washington, D.C., New York, places like that will get power partially restored probably first, usually to the main defense departments. And so most people will not have public power for a long time. And if you are in the rural areas, you will probably get the power restored last. When the power goes down, we expect that natural gas will be also interrupted. Not because natural gas is entirely dependent on power. They have backup generators that are powered by natural gas themselves, but because they are based on multiple computer networks that are that control the flow and pressure of the gas. They actually use the long pipelines as storage containers. They have miles of this, and they pressurize it in preparation for peak demand, and all of that is computer controlled, and it is the computers that is the weak point there. Natural gas may be sporadic, so it is a good idea to have a natural gas connection, especially because you can get a propane tank and you can swap out the orifices for your stoves and water heaters and even your dryer. If you shouldn't be using your precious gas for drying clothes in hard times, but you can switch out all of the jets for them so that you can use propane as a backup. Propane is excellent because it lasts forever, and no one bats an eye if you have multiple 1,000-gallon propane tanks. We expect, because of all this disruption in public utilities, that there will be widespread social unrest, starting probably as soon as a few days after the initial strike. People will be scared. and the store shelves will be emptied. We expect most of the transportation structure to fail the same demands. There will still be some emergency trucking that will continue to flow in some areas, but we expect that most people will be hit hard, and so food, fuel will be hard to find. In the future, this meltdown of society will encourage the powers that be to take the opportunity of this major disruption to enact whatever draconian aspects that they want to, including it could be a police state. They could start persecutions. There will certainly be severe economic problems. There will be a long, wide war, probably the worst we have ever seen. And there follow after that all of the biblical prophecies of earthquakes, plagues, etc. So it's not a very pretty picture at the beginning of our paradigm, but if we prepare well, we can survive this much better. There are multiple levels of preparedness, and everyone is at a different stage in their life about how much they can handle. Preparedness by its nature tends to be expensive, although you can do a lot just by gaining a lot of experience and knowledge in things like growing your own food. But when people start out, they will probably start out at this level, which is the sort of city/bug-out bag level. Most of you here are probably past this level, although there are things to learn even from this level for most people. So everyone should have something to prepare for drinkable water, which means they should have portable filters. They should start buying extra food and storing that away. They need to be able to prepare to travel to safety. That means bug-out bag, some kind of pretty decent vehicle with some ground clearance, preferably four-wheel drive, to get them to preferably a rural location, a family, parents, someone who has agreed to take you in if something calamitous happens. And you need to prepare extra fuel to be able to get there. You need to prepare personal self-defense. Ideally, that would center around a firearm. Power, you need to have some kind of mini solar tiny generator. There are multiple options for that out there. The next level is once you become a homeowner, you want to start implementing some preparedness aspects into your own home. Most of you here at this conference are probably in this category, although many of you have probably started to graduate into the next category. So here you want to add storage to your filter for water. You want to start implementing a large garden and increase your food stockpiles to have at least a year's supply put away. You want to start thinking about your own safe room. You want to have at least a single room put aside that is secure, that is solid, that will protect you and preferably your most important belongings in it. And your most important belongings, of course, are your family. So you want to have something that's large enough to be able to protect you and your loved ones. For defense, you want to start adding sensors to the perimeter. You want to add motion lights. And for power, you want to start thinking about a more permanent solar system and one of those portable generators, which go up to 5 kW. The permanent solar system, if you succumb to the people walking around, the Solar City guys, you want to think about buying the upgraded inverter that will allow you to add on a battery bank at some point. It doesn't cost too much more, and it saves you a lot of headache down the line. Later on, you'll want to graduate to level 3 if you can. Most people may not be able to. This will involve a larger amount of land. We prefer a ½ acre or more. On that, it would be ideal if you had a well. That's an almost unlimited supply of water. If not, a close second to that is to bury a large cistern where you can fill it with water from even city sources and have a small pump that you can access that with. You want to start enlarging your garden area and start to incorporate animals to your homestead layout. You may have to relocate to be able to build a shelter. or you can add on to provide yourself a bigger shelter. The limitations of the safe room start to become apparent rather quickly when you start to fill them with all the things you want to keep safe. And it starts to fill up quickly with all of the food storage and critical things that you don't want people to steal or walk away with. You want to start adding in a security system and more advanced defensive systems, including a reloading setup. Obviously, you want to generate as much of your own power as possible with advanced solar systems, something with a larger array that you can operate with off-grid for indefinite amounts of time. You'll want to incorporate some fuel storage, and you'll probably want to go up to a larger size diesel generator. Now, most people will be progressing from the top left down to the bottom right. You start and you get to the most expensive things at the very end. But this could take a roundabout source. And that's just fine. You might end up with a suburban home and just some of the bug out bag things at first. You may find the opportunity to pick up more of a security system. That's okay. Just know what you are trying to reach in the end game, something where you are prepared. If you can handle the outages, the lack of food, by being as self-sufficient as possible, you can weather the coming storms with almost no major disruptions. Now, everyone will be affected by it. It's not going to be a fun time, but you can have much better methods of you can have a much higher lifestyle at that point if you get enough of these preparedness items in. Now, the first level, of course, is water. Water is the key to life. This is the most important thing to get down. Most people tend to store some water barrels or even just filling up containers with water for long periods of time, and they worry about rotating them, and some people recommend adding chemicals. I don't recommend adding chemicals or rotating the water too frequently. I certainly keep an eye on things, so when it starts to look cloudy, it's valuable to rotate. But the best solution is not to worry about the chemicals or whether or not the water is still safe when you pull it out. The key here is just to have a water filter. The best filters, of course, also purify so that you can take water even not from your storage sites, but from your downspouts off of your rain gutters. You can get some buckets of water from any lake or pond or puddle or any kind of gray water or swimming pool. When you are striving to not just stay hydrated, but to find a way to wash dishes cleanly, to sanitize clothes, to wash wounds and things, all of this, all of the cleanliness relies on having an adequate supply of not just water, but having clean water. We are so used to having just an unlimited supply right out of our tap of clean water that we don't understand how hard it is to get to that level of cleanliness consistently. Now, having just something as simple as this Sawyer filter, which is very cheap and it can handle hundreds of thousands of gallons run through it. It's just a simple gravity filter, or you can pressurize things through it. This takes out all the big particles and the pathogens so that you can be sure that you are not drinking anything that's contaminated. After major natural disasters, one of the biggest problems are dysentery and water cleanliness problems that are making people sick and even making people there's bad enough things that people can start falling off because of it. The problem with the Sawyer filter is that it does not filter chemicals. It does not filter pollution. It does not filter heavy metals. It doesn't filter fluoride. So you have to realize that you have a significant limitation if you go with this cheaper route. Now, it's great for backpacks and a certain amount of bug-out bags, but I prefer that everyone get a Berkey instead. Berkey has black filters that absorb both pathogens and chemicals. There are also optional fluoride filters that will filter heavy metals and even the radioactive elements that will rain down during a nuclear war. This is the ultimate backup. It's also an excellent everyday use item. You can even if you live in California with heavily fluoridated and who knows what kind of chemicals that have come downstream from all the other prior users of the water, you can feel safe putting it through your Berkey, and it will filter out those negative elements, and yet it still manages to keep the dissolved minerals in it. The downside is that this will not filter seawater. It does not take out the saline aspect of seawater, so you will have to find a way to distill that out if you live close to the coast, which we don't recommend. Most of the coastal areas are high-risk zones. Many people think that the Berkey seems very expensive, and it is more expensive up front, but in fact it is one of the cheapest water filter systems because the filters last for so long. You end up running so many gallons through a Berkey filter that the actual cost comes out to be very cheap. You can look at some of the other items, the other filtering aspects out there, and they end up closer to as much as 10 cents to even close to $1 per gallon on some of these more common filter items. There are lots of different ways to filter water. If you really get stuck, you can settle it out. You can drop a bit of salt in to help settle clay out. You can skim off the bad things, run it through coffee filter, and then cloth, sand, charcoals. There's even the option of just putting it into a clear plastic bottle and leaving it out in the sunlight for 6 hours. And that alone will kill off the major pathogens in it. Now, you have to leave it a little bit longer all day if the water is still a little bit murky, but hopefully you've got some simple filters to bring that down. The next step, of course, is to start to store your own water. There are plenty of 5 or 6 gallon jugs. You can also get 100 to 160 gallon tanks, even some that will fit through regular residential doors. And those can be fairly expensive, as much as $2 per gallon for those containers. If you get into the larger containers, you can get some for below ground containers that are $1 per gallon. These are excellent cisterns. If you do not have a well, I really recommend that you put a lot of water aside. You can also store them above ground. These are a lot cheaper tanks. As long as you can keep the dirt off of the top, you can even bury these up to the top level to keep them constant temperature and to maintain the water better. And these will last for 50 cents or these only cost 50 cents to $1 per gallon. So for a 1,000-gallon tank, you're looking at between $500 to $1,000. If you want something more like 5,000, which I highly recommend, you are looking at, a proportionate amount per gallon. If you do have a well, then you want to install a backup hand pump. Depending on the depth of your well, you will need one of these higher capacity units. They have suction pumps for them, which I could cover later if I have enough time. But the best deep well pumps have PVC pipe that extend all the way down within the water depth, and they actually pump from the bottom so that it pressurizes it up to the surface rather than trying to suction it up. One of the most common brands is Simple Pump. It can go down to 200 feet of depth. The cost here is pretty moderate. It's about $1,500 for a 100-foot deep pump. They have an optional solar motor that's pretty pricey, but it is valuable if you are going to rely on that. There are many other solar pump options. If you do have a well, those are well worth looking into if you can get a well. A more expensive and more attractive option is the Bison pump. They last a long time. They are very sturdy. They are not just attractive, but very sturdy. They are also more expensive, $2,500 for a 100-foot well. Another option that isn't as well known that I've run across is called the Storm pump. This is made, I believe, from some folks out there in Idaho. It has very solid construction. It has thicker PVC pipe. It's not as pretty, but it does have very solid components. It will pump faster than the Simple Pump, and it gets up to 100 psi. So this thing really works, even though it doesn't look as attractive. It has a higher price tag that's in between the Bison and the Simple Pump, but the quality makes it a valuable option that I'm presenting here. All right, after you get your water squared away, you'll have to think about food. Obviously, the first step was food storage. You want to start buying more of what you eat and eating that and rotating it. You'll find rather quickly that you are limited by the expiration date on your rotated food supply because you're always eating the oldest item in your rotation. This is where grains and seeds that have an indefinite shelf life really shine, because it doesn't matter how old it is, so you can store as much as you want. You don't want to overlook the important things that people like that make for good flavors that also improve the nutritional content. Foremost among these are the oils and fats. Coconut oil lasts a long time. That's an excellent long-term storage oil that is still healthy. Olive oil lasts for quite a long time if it's in tins, but it still lasts well if it's in plastic containers too. I don't recommend the vegetable oils, the peanut, the rapeseed, the soybean. Most of those are overly processed and already rancid. Peanut butter is one of the difficult ones. It doesn't last very long. The peanut oil in it tends to go rancid. It can last a lot longer if you put it in the fridge or if you store it in the freezer. But obviously, we all have limited freezer space. Tuna fish, salmon, sardines, chicken, beef, chili, Vienna sausages, even Spam, anything that has protein in it, animal meats, are going to be extremely valuable in hard times. These kinds of tins are going to be worth a lot at barter time. Unfortunately, most of them don't have as long of shelf life, but they do last a long time. If you have any kind of warning before hard times hit, you want to go to whatever store, and this is the first thing you want to buy, along with probably batteries and things like that. Now, obviously, if you do have a lot of grain stored away, you'll want a very reliable grinder. This is essentially like not having a can opener if you have a whole supply of cans. If you don't have a good wheat grinder, it's very difficult to make good use of all of the grains you have. One of the best mills happens to also be a hand crank option. Hand crank is nice because there's almost always someone. If you are alive, you usually have enough power to crank through and provide your own food. The benefit of the Wonder Mill is that it grinds not only coarse, but also very fine flour that's excellent for bread making. In fact, the fineness of this mill rivals many of the motorized options. This unit has both stainless steel burr heads has two sets of heads, both the stone heads and the steel burr heads that allow you to grind oily things such as nuts. If you have a nut tree, you can grind your own nut butter with it. It's very sturdy and long-lasting. As far as motorized options, we've been very impressed with this latest model. It's the Mock Mill. The benefit of this mill compared to the more popular micronizer mills is that this mill still uses the stone grinding plates, which means that you can set it to have coarse or fine ground mill and grains. The benefit is that this one will actually produce very fine flour. It's not quite as fast as the micronizer mills. Nothing is as fast as the Wonder Mill or the Nutri-Mill. But this one doesn't heat up the grain. And it still provides flour at a reasonable rate. If you're worried about the speed, you can buy the more expensive Mock Mill 200, which grinds the flour twice as fast. And that's $400 instead of $300. You'll want to start getting into preserving your own food. It's not enough to have an excellent garden. You need to be able to preserve that during the times when the garden's not producing. The garden produces just most of the time, unless you have an excellent greenhouse, the garden produces for a fairly short window during the year. Most of the garden produce comes on at the end of July, August, sometimes September and October, depending on when your first frost is. And you'll want to be able to put that food aside to eat it during the rest of the year. So you want to start first. Probably the easiest method is just a dehydrator. The Nesco Garden Master is a great start to that. It's only $115. You can add a whole bunch of trays and stack it up, and it'll keep dehydrating that stuff. We've really liked the Excalibur. The benefit is that it has square trays, so you can fit a little bit more food on, and there isn't the hole in the middle that food sometimes drops down inside. It's a little bit more expensive, though. The next step is to get into canning. You'll want to get into steam canning. That's the first step. There were a great amount of old-fashioned homesteadings that would really get into steam canning. The key here is that you want to start building up a supply of these glass jars. Everyone's going to need hundreds of these to really put enough food away for themselves every year. The next step is pressure canning. I'm really impressed with the All-American 921 pressure canner. It doesn't have a gasket around it. It has a patented gasketless system. You'll want to get one of these. This is an excellent setup here. You have a gauge, but these gauges have to be calibrated every few years, and so you'll want to get a weight on it that will alternate between 5, 10, and 15 pounds of pressure, and that never needs to be calibrated. The ultimate is the freeze drying. You can freeze dry food. It gives you the best nutritional profile in your preserved food, but it's also the most expensive, although they've come down in price quite a bit. There are even some dented options that I just saw in my email the other day. So if you're looking for a harvest right, these prices continue to come down, and they have bigger units now. The downside to the freeze dryers is that the pumps that they come with require a lot of filters or a lot of oil changes or filtering of the oil. They've come up with an oil-free option now, which is an extra $1,200, and this maintenance-free scroll pump makes the Harvest Right truly an ideal system. It makes it very easy to use with almost none of the drawbacks that they normally have with extra maintenance for the pumps. All right, even though you'll have a lot of food, you'll need a way to cook it. And if there's no natural gas and no power, most people don't have an option to cook without resorting to some kind of external fire outside, which is not a bad idea, but it can get tiresome to heat up food on a fire 3 meals a day, or maybe 2 meals a day, depending on how much food you have. So these are options for cooking. There are simple panel cookers that are just reflective panels that focus heat in on a single pot. There are solar ovens that are more expensive, that have an enclosed box that are insulated, that focus the heat in, and they can get to higher temperatures and hold the heat for longer. If you're looking for the equivalent of a stovetop cooker, these parabolic solar cookers are the closest thing. And these things are quite valuable. You can pull these out, put them into the sun, and you can have an instant hot plate anytime the sun is shining. They heat up very fast, and they do get very hot. It's best with black pans, so you'll want to get used to using cast iron. You can also cook indoors if you have a good wood cooking setup. There are several modern wood cook stoves. You can cook on top of any wood stove. The top just has to get hot enough. You have to be careful around the edges because none of it is insulated. It's meant to radiate heat off. But they have fairly cheap wood cook stoves, wood-fired cook stoves. This La Nordica is only $2,600. They have some attractive red options in it. It is insulated so that you can get close to it, and it focuses the heat on the top and then heats up the oven next to it. I will warn you that it does take a little bit of getting used to cook with wood. You need to start your fire about 45 minutes before you really want to cook things, especially if you're using the oven. But they're valuable, and they can be an attractive piece off in the background so that you can have both your regular stove and oven and have that close to your kitchen. And these will also give off enough heat that they can heat quite a bit of your house with it. So it's a good dual purpose option. If you don't have room for that, you should at least buy some kind of portable wood burning option. This picture here is the tent stoves. These package up small. You can take off the legs and store most of these components inside the stove box. and then you can pull it out and route this out a window or cut a hole in your wall and set this up during hard times so that you can at least have an option for heating, cooking, and heating water. It's cheap, it's portable. There's a brand called Camp Chef that's only $250. If you're stuck without being able to install a wood stove, you can just store this away in your garage until hard times. Even that shouldn't keep people from using wood. There are also many backpacker type wood stoves. These are very cheap, and you can cook with just twigs or dry grass. There are lots of different competitors and different options. The next step, of course, is a shelter. Most of us will already have a house or some place to get in out of the cold and the rain, at least initially. Like I've talked about, you want to have some backup heating options. But when we talk about shelter in light of a nuclear war, the most important, and social unrest, the most important aspect is to have something that's secure enough for you to survive in and live in, to provide you with both some alternate energy and security measures. For most people who are building new construction, the Secure Home book that we sell is going to be what you need to get. It tells you how to implement all kinds of security aspects into your existing home or into a new home. Existing if you are going to add on. If you are going to pour new concrete, you want this book. If you are stuck with your existing house and you don't see yourself moving in the next 5 to 10 years, you should plan on implementing your own safe room. We've designed this high security shelter book for that purpose. In it, we tell you how to build cinder block by cinder block a multi-purpose secure room in the privacy of your own basement. Even if your ceilings are only 8-foot ceilings, you can make one of these shelters inside the basement. You can build it yourself. It's just with cinder blocks, bags of concrete, and steel reinforcement. It's very secure, and it's very strong for both earthquakes, protection against fallout, people trying to break in, and it's also fire and to a certain extent blast resistance. When we talk about shelters, we aren't talking about bomb shelters. We don't design any shelter to withstand the blast of a bomb. That takes feet and feet of concrete and a lot of extra reinforcement. Nobody should be in a blast zone. No one should be in danger of having bombs fall on them. You want to relocate if you are close to that kind of danger. And like I said, the Secure Home book is for new construction. It covers air ventilation, secure storage, and essential living quarters. It talks about security systems, alternate energies, and it has a very effective or a very sought-after recommended product list. Most of you here in Shelley won't need this book. This is Strategic Relocation. You're already in a fairly strategic place, but many of your friends and loved ones are not. This is a good, valuable resources for what are the safe and the safer places. It tells you how to locate away from danger areas. It's chock full of maps and tables and state-by-state information, state ratings, and recommended areas in each state, not just in the Intermountain West, although the Intermountain West is the highest rated place. We have lots of maps with many of the nuclear targets highlighted that we expect to be hit, and we have those blown up by each state as well. All right, then we have this. When you start to prepare for EMP protection, the key is to isolate your house from the rest of the grid. There is multiple levels of EMP dangers. The key is that when the very large spikes get picked up by the long power lines that act like an antenna, that's going to create very strong surges that are going to come through the power lines and try to get into your house. And what you want to do is isolate all of your house and circuits from that major pulse. So here are a couple of options to implement next to your electrical panel in your house. There are several cheaper options like this first surge. The key is that you want to look for a response time that is less than 1 nanosecond. These can be had for less than $200 at many home improvement stores now. The key is to look at the specs and to look for the response time, preferably less than 1 nanosecond on those. And as you can see, it attaches onto your typical breaker box. For your own specific computers and high-end equipment that you want to preserve after an EMP event, you want to have a specific surge protector, because most people's house wirings will also pick up some of the EMP current and provide enough of a shock that things that are plugged in all the time can be fried. So there are several of these plugs that are specific surge arresters. The APC P11 GTV for $45 has a pretty good response time, as does the Panamax PowerMax, and they're fairly competitive in price. The next thing you want to look at are radiation meters. The NucAlert ER is an excellent meter. It has a range from 0.001 to 600 rads per hour. The key here is that you need something that is sensitive to both low and high readings. Most of the radiation meters out there rely on Geiger counter as their key sensor, and the Geiger counters get overwhelmed when the radiation gets above this tiny background levels that they're used to using. So you need to find a meter that is rated for higher radiations per hour, a higher radiation rate. The NucAlert ER is one of the best. It is rated up to 600 rads per hour. The problem is that it is being bought up by government sources. So if you go to the website, you will see that it says, until further notice, only government orders, no private sales. However, their NucAlert is a decent alternative. This is much cheaper. It's only $160 instead of $750. This little keychain unit may be all that most people need for their radiation meters. It is carried constantly with you, which is what you prefer. And when it notices more than 0.1 rads per hour of radiation around you, it starts to chirp. And it chirps faster and faster. On the back, it has a little chart that tells you how much radiation there is based on how fast it is chirping. And it will read up to 50 rads per hour. I'll tell you, no one wants to be out there if there is any more than 10 rads per hour, preferably much less than 1 rad per hour. So if you have this is an excellent little device. The only downside of the NucAlert keychain is that when it gets excited enough to make it start chirping, the sensor is based on a unit that is excited by the radioactive particles running through it. And what happens is it takes a while for it to settle back down after it's been excited. So people who have tested this with X-ray machines find that it still chirps after they've stopped shooting it with the X-ray machine for up to an hour afterwards. So it doesn't give you very good real-time results. And that's the only drawback. You could have made it to shelter and it would still be chirping as if there's a lot of radiation coming at you, but you might still be safe. That's the only drawback to that. One of the good backup options that we found recently, although it's pricey, is the Rad-Eye GF. Now it's important that you look for the Rad-Eye GF. There are several of these Rad-Eye products out there, the Rad-Eye G, the Rad-Eye GS, and you want the Rad-Eye GF10. The key there is to look for not just the dose range, but that it is able to handle a background of up to 100 rads per hour. The benefit of this little unit is that it has a very nice display. It has multiple warning thresholds, and so the light and the audible alarm will go off when it gets up to a certain level of radiation rate. It can also monitor how much radiation it has been exposed to, and if you keep it on you or with you and your family, you can tell what amount of dose of radiation you have received. So it also acts as a dosimeter. And it can store up to 1,600 stored dose rates. The best place to buy it is directly from FisherScientific.com, FisherSci.com. But it is expensive. It's $1,100. I think this particular GF10 unit is $1,160 right now. On eBay, there are still the 1960s era civil defense meters for sale. And these are very valuable, they're very rugged, they're very durable, they last a long time, and you can get them for very reasonable prices. You want to look for the Victorine 715. It has a high range. It goes from 0.1 rads per hour up to 500. That's the same. It's roughly equivalent to rams to rads. You can find them on eBay, like I said, for about $150. The model 717 has a detachable sensor. What you don't want to buy are the model 700 units that have low ranges. Some of them are meant to measure more background radiation levels, and they measure a smaller percentage at the low range, down to 0.001 rads, up to only 5. And like I mentioned before, these become oversaturated at high levels. So look for the 717 or the 715 Victorine meters. The ultimate backup is the very simple unit. You can make this yourself. It was invented by a man named Carney. It's called the Carney Fallout Meter, or KFM. It's a very simple do-it-yourself kit. It's extremely cheap, and you can even get plans for free at oism.org. This is sensitive enough to measure background radiation. It will even measure radon. And you can use this as your ultimate backup test to see if any of your other meters are functioning properly. So if you have the Carney Fallout meter together with this little nuke alert keychain meter, you can have what you need. To protect yourself from the effects of the radioactive particles, the most important thing to have on hand is potassium iodide. These are pills that saturate the thyroid and avoid the uptake of radioactive iodine I-131, which was the one radioisotope that caused the most long-term effects from Chernobyl. People that had sufficient proper iodine that was not radioactive in their thyroids were able to avoid the worst cancer associated with Chernobyl, which was thyroid cancer. Now you can gain most of these benefits by getting high potency iodine, such as this iodoral tablets. You can store these as well, and these are available at most pharmacies. There are other dosimeters out there. You can look at the rad stickers at ki4u.com, or you can get some of the dosimeter pens at eBay. Moving on to some of the other high-tech options to make your life easier in hard times, you can consider these off-grid batteries. These are the best ones that we have found. These are lithium iron phosphate batteries, or lithium ferrous phosphate, LFP batteries. Right now, the best brand of this is Simplify. These cost about 10 times more than lead acid batteries, so the price tag on them is sometimes very shocking to people. But the trick to remember is that they have more than that in life cycle, at least 11 times more power generation storage cycle capacity than lead acid batteries do. And the big benefit is that there is no maintenance, so that it will be very unlikely that anyone will have to replace these batteries, even in a 10-year lifespan. These things have a 10,000 cycle warranty, and they can be discharged much further. The literature says as much as 90% discharge. And if you compare that to lead acid batteries start to lose their capacity very quickly if you get them down to even 50% of their capacity. If you draw more than 50% of the power out of the lead acid batteries, you start to deteriorate their lifespan significantly. So these batteries can go all the way down and bring them all the way back up 10,000 times. So it's a lot more battery that you are buying for the more expensive cost. We hope that these prices will continue to come down in the future. As far as small rechargeable batteries, you have AA and AAA. The Fujitsu battery is the best brand. It is the same battery that it's manufactured in Japan, which is the same battery factory that produced the Eneloop batteries and gave the Eneloop batteries such a good brand name recognition. Eneloop, however, has now moved their factory to China, and they're manufacturing cheaper products now. So Fujitsu is still the best rechargeable battery for AA and AAA. As far as battery chargers, you want to look for something like the Opus BT C2000 for $34, or the picture here is of the IQ338XL. The IQ is pictured here because it also provides the C and the D battery recharges. It can recharge C and D as well as C123A, 9-volt, and even lithium ion. The only thing it doesn't recharge are the 9-volt lithium batteries. The downside is that it doesn't have a temperature sensor, and it doesn't get the batteries quite as peak full as the Opus does. So the Opus is still it is by far the best battery charger for the AA and AAA, which is mostly what we use. But it's probably valuable to have both this IQ and the Opus on hand for charging up batteries. Now moving on to home security, the most important aspect of the initial phase of home security is to install good motion lights. After substantial research into the various motion lights, the only one that really cuts it is this RAB Super Stealth. It has the best sensing distance. It can practically get up to 75 feet, although it's rated for 50 feet, which is much further than the typical 30-foot sensors. And it also has a sensor underneath that can sense people that are trying to sneak around the main sensor. So it truly has a 360-degree sensor on it. It's very durable, long-lasting. The key is that, and this is harder and harder to find, that you shouldn't use LED lights in it. It can actually damage the sensor. So it's best to get the standard halogen or incandescent floodlights for this unit. If you do want to use LEDs, you can buy the STL 110s or 220 LED versions, but they have a smaller angle of view, 110 degrees or 220 degrees. A valuable part of security systems is monitoring the road in, so that you get a little beep or alarm when someone crosses the perimeter of your property. Obviously, if you have a good guard dog, he does that before the person even crosses the property. But if you don't, you might want to consider this Chamberlain motion sensor. It's only $99. It uses a passive infrared system, so it doesn't catch blowing wind and rain and leaves, but it does detect warm body things such as animals, humans, and warm cars. People find it especially useful if they keep it down at a low angle so that it can see the exhaust pipe of cars, just in case the car hasn't been running for very long and hasn't started to show off a warm infrared signature yet. It's battery powered, so you don't have to run a line out to the sensor, and some people say that the batteries last over two years, but there are variations in quality on this unit now, but it's still the best one I've found. It has a quote-unquote up to half-mile range. That depends on, of course, trees and blockages, how thick your walls are, and it sends a sensor to this unit that you store indoors, which flashes a light and gives you an audible sound. And you can buy up to 7 more of these so that you have 8 total sensors around the property, and they will each give a slightly different light or sound blinking combination to this unit so that you can tell a little bit better which part of your property is being affected. The key part of having a good security system is that even if you have sensors or lights, you eventually have to back it up with some kind of force. And we won't always have police backup, police protection to get to us, and so it will often land on the homeowner who will have to provide the force and the deterrent to drive off any invaders or attackers. The first firearm you should get should be a concealed carry handgun. There are lots of options out there. The key is to look for one that you like, that fits in your hand well, that is comfortable, that you can rack the slide on or handle the trigger with it. And among those options, if those aren't a critical aspect, you want to start looking at magazine capacity. One of the best lately is this P365 Nitron. This is a Sig Sauer. It's a micro compact, and it has more for its size of rounds than any of the other micro compacts handguns, with 10+1 in the magazine. Once you have a good handgun, you want to start considering a rifle. The tactical rifle is the key to project force. in a real firefight. The handgun is considered by the military just a sidearm. The rifle is your key weapon. The best for most people will be the lightweight and very accurate 223 or 5.56 rifles. You can get a 308, which is much more powerful and has a much longer range, but they are heavier and harder for most people to handle. The best of the 223s right now is a very cheap. It's called the S&W M&P 15, the Sport 2, and it's an excellent deal. It's out there. If you keep an eye out, you can find it for as little as $500, which is much less than the typical $1,000 for any kind of tactical rifle. Now, when you are in a home defense situation, you have a difficult conundrum. You want to be able to hear the tiniest sounds of someone who might be lurking in your house, and yet you still want to protect your ears when you are firing a high-powered weapon, especially if you decide to defend yourself with a shotgun. That can produce a significant amount of ringing and maybe even damage your eardrums, especially when you're shooting it off indoors. The best option is what the military has found, which is called sound amplifying headsets. Most of these are very expensive. They can be up to $800 to $1,000 for a single unit. The best military grade version of this is the Skousen Pro X. It's still military grade. That's what the X stands for, and they usually run around $200. You might also want to consider a small safe. We found these recently. These are from Liberty Safe. These are quick access safes, so you can store a firearm in them and still get very quick access to them, but they are very secure. These have the best biometric scanners on the market, so they have the lowest fail rating on them, which means that you are more likely with a single swipe of your finger to gain access. Many of the biometric scanners require multiple scans. And these are called the HGX Smart Vault series. And there are several sizes, and you can secure them with various ways. The HGX 250 here is large enough for critical documents as well as maybe a larger handgun. This one is small enough to fit under the seat of most cars and is extremely valuable. There are lots of other options and different tech out there for preparation methods. I'll just run through a couple of these last slides here. These are some of the brighter flashlights. You want to look for some that have both rechargeable options and will take disposable batteries, just in case you run out of a rechargeable, but you have some disposable batteries on hand. The Coast brand has some excellent units. You can even recharge them via USB port. They have multiple inserts to them. The same thing with the Black Diamond Revolt. Can take multiple different batteries. The hybrid light can charge by solar. You've seen many of these around. There's even better ones now that can store power, and you can use them to recharge other devices. You want to think about how to communicate in a hard time. There are lots of different options, but an EMP strike will take down most of our sources of information, our cell phones, our internet, even the local radio stations. But there will still be some AM and FM and weather options, but the biggest one is probably going to be shortwave. People have forgotten about shortwave radios with all of the high tech, but you should get a world band radio receiver. You should also get some walkie-talkies, some family band radios for talking amongst your family when you're out and about, when you don't have the ease of cell phones. We've all forgotten how to get around without being able to talk to each other whenever we want. Ham radios are ultimately the best option. They give you the most latitude in communicating at higher powers and at various frequencies to reach out for long distances. The testing is not that hard to get through. So there's some AM, FM radios, shortwave radios, good family band radios. This one floats, so you can drop it, and it's bright orange, so it's easy to find. But there are also lots of ham radios that are very cheap, like this Baofeng, that are very easy to get and pretty easy to pick up and learn now. They've gotten a lot better at their instruction manual. It used to be terrible. Later on, if you get into a retreat homestead, you'll want to be able to learn how to do more things yourself. We talked about getting a suction pump. If you have a cistern close to the surface, you can pull water out of that right into your kitchen sink if you install it right. Lots of different options. You want to think about how to wash clothes if you can get enough clean water like I talked about. There are lots of different options for making sure that you get your clothes clean. These wringers end up being a very important item if you're going to wash clothes by hand. The best is this Dynajet. It's a little bit expensive at $140, but it's very effective and it's long lasting. Don't forget to have a way to dry your clothes. You might want to think of a washboard. And there are also some excellent warm winter clothing that we've talked about. We also like the rocket mass heaters. There's lots of plans for those online. And there's plenty more. So we talk about these things every week at the World Affairs Brief. I write a preparedness tip at the end of each brief that my dad writes. And I also am working on a website called truepreparedness.com. And there is a substantial recommended product list at the end of all of our books that are all useful for these. With that, I turn it over to you, and we should have an opportunity to answer a few questions here. I will try to be available for that. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you, even though it's remote in this case, and I hope you enjoy your day at Shelley, Idaho.